Hello everyone, Pulse here, and welcome to another episode of Forging Fantasy, EverQuest Next. Now in today's episode we're going to discuss a little bit about this idea of EverQuest Next Landmark actually having combat and combat elements implemented inside of it, and at the end of all this I'm going to throw my opinions out there for the latest roundtable question, which happens to be about guilds and EverQuest Next. So let's get right into the meat of it, shall we? So about mid-Tuesday, I would say, September 24th, Dave Georgeson, the Director of Development for EverQuest Next and EverQuest Next Landmark, took to the Twitters with a fairly uninformative tease in the form of the following tweet. "I've been asked to leak something," he says. "Landmark will have combat elements. Maybe not right at launch, but it's coming. Begin speculation, smiley face." Now, this really came out of nowhere and admittedly was a big surprise to me and to a lot of other people because as far as we knew, Landmark was all about the creation aspects and all about the creativity that the player base can have and letting their imaginations run wild, essentially, while EverQuest Next, the MMO, would be the RPG and the MMO with all the combat mechanics and the epic adventure and the group content and all that typical MMO stuff. Now, this could mean a lot of different things. There's a lot that could happen with EverQuest Next Landmark. So what are the ideas that could be going on with SOE and the development here? And I came up with a couple possibilities for what they're going for with Landmark. The first one here is, in order to make your claim, so to speak, and quote-unquote own your part of the world, maybe you have to fight off the denizens of the area, be it the wildlife, hostile bandits, or elementals, or whatever, really. And maybe that's part of making your claim, is you have to actually fight off the mobs that are spawning out in the world. If we take this a little bit further, another possibility that would kind of be coupled with that is that they would be implementing PvP areas or instances or zones or servers, what have you, which would require combat in order to keep your land safe and sound from other players, not just the NPCs. This alongside the idea that I mentioned kind of in prior episodes where I was looking for SOE to provide the PvP situations for different player groups or factions or what have you to wage war on each other, coupled with the idea that NPCs would be out in the world is something I definitely foresee happening. Good Lord, cannot talk. But the idea would be that players and groups of players would build up their sort of separate buildings or castles or cities or whatever, really, and through the advantages of the voxel-based construction and destruction, there would be a real sense of loss and gain when fighting over certain areas, because you and your comrades could have built something very awesome, but for whatever reason there needs to be incentive that we don't really know, but the idea would be incentive provided. Two groups of people or more could wage war over each other on separate resources or different parts of land or whatever, really, and in doing so you would lose and gain property, be it your own that you created. You'd gain new area to build new stuff or even take over what somebody else had previously built. Just the possibilities are quite high with this idea, and if this does happen, I would expect it to be separate, like PvP servers or specified areas that are deliberately marked as this is hardcore PvP area. Don't build here unless you intend to participate in such crazy PvP nonsense. Now, the last idea I kind of thought would be a possibility is that, as I mentioned in a previous version of EverQuest Next, Jesus, Forging Fantasy, losing my mind here, still recovering from sickness, admittedly, was that they could maybe go for this idea of letting the players make adventures or dungeons in the similar fashion to what Neverwinter's Foundry does, and the idea was that SOE would use Landmark as their version for that, allowing players to essentially create all these different adventures and dungeons and just all around a bunch of different experiences that would be more typical MMO fare, but they could do it with the Landmark tools. And I was thinking that they could implement the dungeons in Landmark, like, you could create them anyway, and then they could, if they like them enough, like if they seen there was maybe a contest winner or it was just really well done, they could copy paste the dungeon from Landmark, make a couple tweaks if they see need to, and then plop it into the MMO version, and voila, there you go, you have your created dungeon inside the legitimate MMO version of the game. I do think, though, if combat's going to be implemented in the Landmark version of the game, perhaps this lends itself to doing separate off instances, kind of how the Foundry does it. So they wouldn't technically have to even be in one game or the other. It would just be its own separate server, and you could enter it from whichever game, perhaps, and then you could experience these player-made dungeons and that sort of thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you are allowed to add minions and create your own dungeons, I would also expect combat to be available as a form of testing so that you can actually balance what you're trying to make. And by extension, I would also imagine you can allow other players to join you in these sort of not quite finished dungeons to test your experiences. Now, of these possibilities, I honestly think that all of them sound fairly appealing to me, and the experience that is Landmark, I think they could all do fairly well to enhance what we've already been shown, which is the amazing building potential. But I am only one side of the pie, to be completely honest. There's quite a bit of questioning coming on about this decision for combat in Landmark, as a lot of people were really interested in EverQuest Next Landmark as more of a creative tool and less of a game. That's what EverQuest Next, the MMO, is for, right? I mean, that's really the argument, is why are you blending these two together so much? Why are you blurring the line? I thought the whole idea was to release two separate experiences that are slightly tied together because of what you can do with the voxel-based generation and stuff. Well, yes and no. That this is kind of true, but also not. They've said multiple times now that these are indeed two separate experiences, and even though the information we have now makes the line between those two games blur quite significantly, we shouldn't worry, and we'll actually have two separate games that don't really compete over the same niche. They will actually fulfill two separate needs in the gaming world, essentially. In addition to this, it should be noted that Georgeson made sure to reply to a concerned Twitter follower who expressed worry that this really defeated the purpose and the whole appeal for her as a designer and a world builder. And he simply replied with a "we'll take care of you." But that made me think that Landmark, what it truly is, it really made me delve into what is Landmark going to be by the end of it, and what is it that they're trying to create. And in my head, I really foresee SOE going for a next generation Minecraft style experience alongside the Foundry ability to create experiences like that, and join it all together with the EverQuest universe. And well, what the hell do I mean by that? Well, think of it this way. In Minecraft, you have many different game modes, and alongside that, nearly limitless possibilities when it comes to building, both in terms of actual buildings, but also experiences such as the adventure maps. Now, you also have the barebones survival mode, which would be similar to the first possibility I mentioned earlier, that in order to keep your land and make your claim, you have to pretty much start from scratch and fight for what's yours, what you want to gain in the world. So, in the end, Landmark will have multiple modes of play, just like a game like Minecraft does, with game modes and areas specifically made for those who want only to create, potentially even allowing you to bypass some of the crafting and gathering mechanics SOE has mentioned, so that you aren't limited by gathering your materials, but instead you're limited by your imagination and your time input, essentially. There would be game modes and areas for those who wish to earn it all and feel the accomplishment of building something extraordinary by overcoming immense odds and time, and just building it up from scratch. There's definitely people that like to do that. There would be potentially modes and areas which allow you to venture through other players' creations, like I said, the Foundry style content. and maybe they could take it all the way in that regard and provide PvP content as well, which would be different than any other MMO before, where your hard work in the form of buildings and actual tangible objects in the world can be lost and gained. And it's really something that would be very interesting to see, mainly because you don't feel the same kind of loss that you would if you built something very nice. It was very tangible. You spend a good amount of time there, and your hard work manifesting in the game world as a city or castle or what have you. It feels great that you have it, but the risk, that feeling that you get when you have this adrenaline rush from the potential of losing something that you worked hard for, it can't be replicated really. And it's something I'd like to see in games, and it's obviously not going to be for everyone. It's not the kind of content that everyone will enjoy, and in fact I don't PvP a lot myself, but I would probably dabble in such things before nerd raging when somebody destroys my stuff. But the fact is, I think this is content that would really be cool to see. Now, in the end, this is all speculation, mind you, but this hint at combat really makes me believe that they're definitely trying to capture the same appeal that Minecraft and similar games have, with numerous types of content which are improved and enhanced by the player base. So that'll do it for me, guys, on the main discussion about the combat and its potential in EverQuest Next Landmark. But there's still one more thing. What about the latest roundtable question? Well, don't you worry, I've got my answer for you. Now, the latest question is 1 guild per character in EverQuest Next, or more. So the options for answers here are the typical I have no preference, I want to join more than 1 guild at a time, they're social groups and I want as many as I'd like, I prefer to keep it simple, 1 character can belong to 1 guild, no more, I'd like different types of guild, examples being families, alliances, guilds, and you belong to 1 of each. I don't want to see any type of guild system at all. Now, the first and the last answers seem silly. I have no preference. I still don't know why this is on the thing here, because if you don't have a preference, I feel like you really need to sit back, think about what you would like to see. For Christ's sake, everyone has an opinion, so you don't just sit right in the middle. Vote for the one that you think is the most important. If you don't have a preference, then don't vote. I just don't see the point. If you really feel the need to vote, I guess that's why this is here. But if you really can't decide, then there's no point in voting. It just defeats the purpose of a vote. The last one, I don't want to see any type of guild system at all. I'm not sure what kind of person would put that as an answer, because if you don't want guilds, you just don't join one. I'm sorry. Guilds are such a huge part of MMO and the sociability of it all. I just don't see the point of not implementing guilds. So if you don't want guilds, just don't join the guild. I'm sorry. But the other 3 answers are all pretty good ones. I want to join more than 1 guild at a time because they're social groups. Normally I would go with this. The problem is, after playing an extensive amount of Guild Wars 2, I actually don't like this idea of multiple guilds anymore. Now, obviously we don't know EverQuest Next and the style of like endgame or anything like that. And I feel like one of the problems in Guild Wars 2 is because their endgame isn't like typical MMO fare. The drive to keep people together in a group of people that you actually like playing in a guild setting, it's diminished pretty heavily. Anyone that's played Guild Wars 2 can tell you that guilds come and go fairly quickly compared to other MMOs that are alongside it. I think one of the problems that came about having multiple guilds being a possibility was that there's no sense of real adjoining interest, and there's no real camaraderie that comes along with it, because what happens, and I know from experience this is a possibility that can happen, is where you'll have a guild and you'll play it like all the content you want to with your guild mates, and you'll even become quite friendly with them, and then just slowly you'll see people come and go, and it becomes this weird problem where one person will stay with the guild while another person would gladly jump guilds over and over again. And I found that it was actually pretty much allowing people to easily jump guilds, which was something that I found to be a problem in WoW. Was people that jump guilds all the time, I mean, you can look and see at WoW's overall sort of structure. They don't want you to do that, obviously, but it's still something that happens all the time. People just hopping guilds all over the place. And the fact that you could join multiple guilds really made it so that you could just kind of go on this ever-turning wheel of guilds. You'll just start on one, go get your 5 or however many guilds, and then just rotate them out and get new ones, and so on and so forth. And you never really see communities stick together in one guild. So I think I would actually pass on that, because I like the idea of it. It just, from what I've seen prior with multiple guild systems, I just don't think it's a good idea, actually. I think it diminishes the whole sense of community that comes along with a guild, because you don't feel that need to stick around, I guess. Now, the next one is I prefer to keep it simple. One character can belong to one guild, no more. This is actually the most voted for, and I think that's just the EverQuest and the hardcore MMO kind of fans following EverQuest Next putting their vote to that one. I think that's actually a good choice, because between this one and multiple guilds, without knowing too much, I would definitely vote for the single guild thing, because you can join multiple guilds with different characters, and there's definitely a reason to do so. If you feel the need to join multiple guilds and have separate experiences, you can do it that way. But with one guild, if there is that limiter, you do get attached to the people there. So I think that's a good option. But before I answer, let's get to the last one. I'd like the different types of guilds, families, alliances, and guilds, and you can belong to one of each. I wanted to talk about this one because that's a very interesting kind of answer, and I want to know more, to be honest. The idea of families, alliances, and guilds kind of being separate but connected entities, like, so you would have, all of them would be labeled guilds, pretty much, and you would have, like, your tight-knit family, I guess. You would have, like, your full-on, I guess, faction war kind of big alliance guilds, and then you would have your guilds, which would be, like, I would imagine PvE content or what have you. This is just total speculation off the top of my head for what they could mean by this. I'd really like to see more. I'm not sure, to be honest. If I had to pick right now, simply for the fact that I need to know more by what this means, I would actually vote for I'd like different types of guilds, just because I want to see where this could go, because I mean, this could appeal to a lot of different people. The idea is, I mean, with multiple guilds, it doesn't even have to be limited to families, alliances, and guilds. These are really arbitrary labels, essentially. You could have ones that were like a crafters gathering or what have you, and that could be a guild, and there could be bonuses to everybody in that being a crafter and that sort of thing. So, I mean, that would kind of lend itself towards a nice mix, I think, between the idea that only one character could belong to one guild, while also appealing to the idea that multiple guilds are a good thing, and social groups and all of that sociability nonsense that comes along with multiple guilds. So at the moment, I'm going to vote for I'd like different types of guilds, families, alliances, guilds, crafters, workbenches, whatever, and I want to see more. I want to see what's going to happen with this. If this is a possibility, since it has to be, since they're asking us what we would like to see, I have to imagine they're already exploring possibilities of multiple guilds. So I want to find out more, and for that reason, I'm going to vote that way. But that'll do it for me, guys, on this episode. Got a little bit rambly there. I'm still recovering from sickness, admittedly, so apologize. I apologize if anything was hard to hear, if I'm mumbly, or if I've sniffled or anything like that. But let me know down below in the comments what you think of combat, and what, where, why, and how it could be used in Landmark. How would you guys like to see it, if at all? If you enjoyed this video in the slightest, I would very much appreciate a thumbs up, a subscribe, leave a comment down below on anything we discuss in this video, anything EverQuest Next, or anything MMO or gaming related in the slightest. Thanks so much for watching, guys. This has been Pulse, bringing you more EverQuest Next goodness, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.